and welcome. I am Ellie Richardson and you are watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Ukraine and Russia have conducted their first prisoner exchange in months, each releasing at least 157 people, amid US brokered talks in Abu Dhabi aimed at ending the war. The two sides have in the past conducted several rounds of such prisoner swaps. Meanwhile, the Russia-Ukraine-US talks in Abu Dhabi have concluded. Zelensky's top aide stated that the talks were really constructive. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer apologises to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein for appointing Peter Mandelson as the UK ambassador to the US, despite his close ties to Epstein. Starmer admitted that while it was known Mandelson knew Epstein, the full extent of their relationship was not understood until recently. The US and Iran agreed to hold talks in Oman on Friday, despite sharp differences over the scope of negotiations. Washington seeks to include Iran's missile program, while Tehran says only its nuclear file is on the table. China's leader Xi Jinping has called Taiwan the most important issue in China-US relations during a phone call with US President Donald Trump. Xi told Trump to be prudent when supplying weapons to the island, state media report. A legal rights group says Venezuela frees 22 more prisoners. The releases come as interim government promises slowly continue. Gaza health officials say Israeli tanks, shelling and airstrikes killed 26 Palestinians, including 7 children. The dead includes a medic killed while responding to a strike in Khan Yunis. Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu deploys an army to Kwara State after gunmen killed as many as 162 people in one of the country's deadliest attacks in recent months. Bababumo Ayodi, Kwara State Secretary, has said that the search for the more bodies continue. And for your top story this hour, Kremlin spokesperson says Russia is still ready to talk if US responds to its proposal on extending nuclear arms limits. Moscow says it regrets the expiration of the New START treaty, the last remaining nuclear arms pact between Russia and the United States. The New START treaty is a nuclear arms control agreement signed in 2010 that limits how many nuclear warheads, missiles and bombers the US and Russia can deploy. The Kremlin says the end of the agreement leaves the world's 2 largest nuclear powers without any limits on their arsenals for the first time in more than 50 years. President Vladimir Putin had earlier offered to stick to the treaty's limits for another year if Washington did the same. But the US has not committed, with President Donald Trump pushing for a broader deal that includes China, an idea Beijing has rejected. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says Russia views the treaty's expiration negatively, but will act in a balanced and responsible manner, guided by national interests. We are now being joined by Matthew Verdum, who's an American journalist, joining us from Washington. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Why has Russia conditioned its openness to nuclear arms talks on a specific US response to its proposal to extend the New START limits? And what does this reveal about the current state of strategic trust between Washington and Moscow?
That's quite a question. I think Russia is, doesn't trust the United States, especially because the United States has been so helpful to its enemy that it's waging war against, Ukraine. And Russia wants to make things as difficult as possible. Perhaps they don't want to um, actually limit nuclear arms proliferation, and so maybe this is a poison pill designed to prevent the negotiations from actually moving forward.
And how might this expiration affect global nuclear stability? And what role could renewed dialogue play in mitigating those risks?
Well, if the two sides here, being Russia and the United States, are talking, then the possibility of preventing the spread of nuclear weapons beyond those countries that already have them could be prevented. So, there's always a risk involved, and this is an attempt to mitigate that risk. I think that while the two sides don't agree with each other, probably not a lot of progress is going to be made on limiting nuclear arms, or in limiting the arsenals that Russia and the United States have aimed at each other. I don't think that the United States is interested in starting, a nuclear war, pretty obviously, but the United States also does not want to be put at a disadvantage with respect to Russia's nuclear arsenal.
And could linking nuclear arms talks to broader geopolitical issues and disputes such as the war in Ukraine, can this make it harder to achieve substantive progress on arms control?
Yeah, definitely. The fact that they're not the fact that the two sides are off to a shaky start here in renewing that was a pun, sorry, are off to a shaky start in renewing the treaty is not does not bode well for the effort, and but that doesn't mean that it's not going to work out in the end. This is only the beginning of the process, and there's still a lot of time to turn things around.
And obviously, Trump said that he'd like in the new agreement for China to also be included, and China have rejected. Do you think that we're ever going to get to a point where they both agree on a new treaty and sign it, or is Trump going to stand firm on having China in on it as well?
Yeah, I'm not. Well, I think the wild card here are the Chinese. Are the Chinese going to want to limit their nuclear arsenal, their nuclear reach in the world? Maybe they'd be interested in that, but I just don't see that happen. China views itself as a rising power. It views itself as the real legitimate superpower in the world, and I don't think that it's going to be easily dissuaded from pursuing its nuclear ambitions.
Thank you, Matthew, but don't go too far as we will be coming back to you a bit later. During a visit to Kyiv, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said that Poland is preparing a new $55.91 million aid package for Ukraine, mainly made up of armed equipment. He has said that Poland could give Ukraine MiG-29 fighter jets at any time, but that Vladimir Zelensky had told him Kyiv may need other air defense equipment as a higher priority. He further said that he would discuss this with the Polish officials and get back to the Ukrainian president by Monday. During the meeting between Tusk and Zelensky in Kyiv, the two leaders also signed a letter of intent covering joint defense productions between Poland and Ukraine. Poland has been one of Ukraine's key military and political supporters since Russia's full-scale invasion, providing weapons, training and logistical assistance while advocating for stronger Western backing for Kyiv. We are now being joined again by Matthew. Thank you for joining back. What strategic message does Poland send by stepping up military aid for Ukraine, especially when the war has now was coming up to 4 years and other allies have varying levels of support?
Poland is sending the message that they don't want to give up on Ukraine, that they want Ukraine to continue the fight against aggressive Russia, and they want to keep it going because a lot of Europeans feel, I think justifiably, they feel threatened by Russia's aggressive policy of military expansion, and they feel that if Ukraine falls, if the situation in Ukraine is not rectified, if Ukraine doesn't get its original territory back, that they're next. People are very alarmed in the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, Finland, Germany, not just Poland. People are, government officials and, the people at large are worried about a resurgent Russia coming and threatening their territorial sovereignty. And so they support efforts, Ukraine's efforts to fight Russia.
In what ways does Poland's aid package reflect its own security concerns, given its geographical proximity to the war and connections to broader NATO defence planning? As before, we know that some drone attacks have gone into Poland.
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I think that Poland is doing what it thinks it can, what it thinks is best to support the Ukraine's effort to fight back against Russia. How this reflects on Poland, I'm not really able to say. But I think that Poland thinks that they are legitimately putting forward their best effort to support Ukraine, which they believe has been unfairly attacked by Russia, and they want to fight back.
Thank you, Matthew. Don't go too far, as we will be coming back to you in just a moment. Poland's Justice Minister, Waldemar Żurek, announced that a team of Secret Service officials, prosecutors and police will investigate links between convicted US sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and Poland. This team, formed after the release of millions of documents by the US Justice Department this week, will explore potential Polish connections to Epstein's network, including the involvement of 2 individuals, 1 Polish woman and 1 Polish man, in Epstein's operation. Żurek emphasized that the team would investigate whether there were activities involving Epstein's network in Poland, including the possible presence of Polish victims. The investigation could eventually lead to a formal commission and request for classified US documents. Prime Minister Donald Tusk also announced Poland would examine possible links between Epstein and Russian intelligence, although the Kremlin dismissed the claims. We are now being rejoined by Matthew Vadum. Thank you for rejoining us here. Why is Poland investigating the Epstein files now? And what does this say about how countries are handling this international abuse cases?
I suspect Poland is investigating the Epstein files now because so many international players have been implicated in the latest document dump by the U.S. Department of Justice. Something like 3 million documents, papers, videos, photographs, and so on were released just days ago by the Justice Department, and a lot of people are scrambling to to deal with the fallout. You look at Britain, where right now Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government is teetering on the verge of collapse. At least his prime ministership is in jeopardy because he appointed an Epstein friend as ambassador to the United States, and apparently knew at the time that the man was, an Epstein friend. So, and then look at what's happened to former Prince Andrew there. The way that his titles have been stripped, and he's being evicted from his home by his brother, King Charles. So, there's been a lot of consequences for people who are have been tied to Epstein, and I think Poland wants to probably wants to get ahead of the problem and know what it's dealing with. I am not aware of any allegations being made against Polish nationals specifically as a result of the disclosures made in the Epstein files.
And how can Poland investigate safely while protecting victims' privacy and ensuring a fair legal process?
Well, they could do something like what the U.S. did when the U.S. Congress adopted the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and said that while files are being released, they must be reviewed to make sure that they're not identifying victims or potential victims, or people who are uninvolved, with Epstein, so that people aren't falsely accused of doing things. And so the law states that the files, that the Justice Department has to go through the files and clear them before they're released. And if you've gone through the files, you'll see there's a lot of photographs, with people's eyes, blacked out in a black box, so you can't identify them. And they've taken efforts to protect identities where possible. Still, a lot of scurrilous allegations are contained in the Epstein files that have been disclosed, and it's probably impossible to guard against releasing them all. So, if Poland tries to be cautious, as the United States Congress was, they may end up not hurting too many innocent people, but some innocent people are probably going to get hurt anyway, especially when there is. I think it's fair to say about the Epstein files that there is widespread public hysteria among people in governments around the world about what it means, or the people in the political base of President Trump want to see the rich and famous brought down by Epstein files disclosures, and they've been baying for blood for a long time, and without regard to who actually gets hurt by the disclosure of raw police investigative files that really should never have seen the light of day.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have seized 2 oil tankers with their foreign crews in Gulf waters for smuggling fuel. The seizures comes amid the heightened tensions after Washington dispatched a naval group to the region following Tehran's deadly response to anti-government protests. According to reports, more than 1 million litres of smuggled fuel have been found on board of the 2 vessels. Meanwhile, Iran's commander of GC's second naval zone has responded. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
این با توجه به اشراف کامل نیروی دریایی سپاه بر خلیج فارس منطقه دوم نیروی دریایی مثل اشرافی که داشت متوجه تردد 2 فروند شناور عامل قاچاق سوخت شد. با حکم قضایی این 2 شناور تقریبا در محدوده استفاده جزیره اقتدار جزیره فارسی.
According to reports, Iranian and US officials have confirmed that a meeting between their countries would be held in Muscat, the capital of Osman. However, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced that the nuclear talks are now scheduled for Friday in Muscat and said that he is grateful to his Omani brothers for making all the necessary arrangements. We are now being joined by Alison Mutzler, a former AP Bureau Chief, joining us from Romania. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. How could Iran's seizure of 2 tankers affect the upcoming nuclear talks with the US?
Well, it just adds more tension to an already tense situation. I suppose Iran sees it as a bargaining chip. They're showing that they do have strength and they will act on it. But I think it will add tension to the talks in the region, and it won't lead to a de-escalation as many are calling for, including German Chancellor Merz. So I suppose from Iran's point of view, it gives it a more favourable bargaining position because it shows it does have the strength to seize these tankers, but generally speaking, it will just escalate tensions in an already tense period.
And you just touched on it there about how this could give Iran more leverage when negotiating with the US. Do you think it will do just that with these talks on Friday?
It's hard to predict how it will play out because we're talking about Donald Trump's administration, and he's not known for his administration, particularly Donald Trump, is not known for its predictability. So it is hard to assess how it will play out, but it could give Iran more leverage in the sense that Washington would, even if it didn't say so, would respect the show of strength. And also, it's quite clear that Washington is quite aware of the complications, the regional, the national, the complications of getting involved in any kind of strike on Iran. It's not like what they did in Venezuela when they took out Maduro. It's far more complicated with all the various nations, the different factions, and it would not be an operation as easy as one in Venezuela. So I think so far Washington has shown some caution about getting involved. Okay, they have moved warships to the region, so that is a show that they are serious. But we haven't really seen any military action. I know the Iranian drone was downed. So I think Washington is holding off. And perhaps this, what Iran did, will be seen as a show of strength by Washington, and it will dissuade it from wanting to take any military action there, which I'm not sure that it does at the moment.
Thank you, Alison, for joining us here today on NewsX World. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is urging Iran to ease tensions in the Middle East just ahead of the planned nuclear talks between Tehran and Washington in Oman. Speaking during a visit to Qatar, Merz warned that the risk of a military escalation in the region remains high and said diplomacy must move faster to prevent further instability. He called on Iran to seriously engage in negotiations and to reduce action that threaten neighbouring countries. Merz said Germany is closely coordinating with the United States and regional partners. Let's listen in.
Auch ich im letzten Jahr. Ich will auch von dieser Seite aus die iranische Führung noch einmal aufrufen, jetzt wirklich in Gespräche einzutreten, die Aggressionen zu beenden, das Atomprogramm zu beenden, so wie es international vereinbart ist, und vor allem Länder wie Katar, Jordanien und Israel von weiteren militärischen Bedrohungen zu verschonen. Es wäre gut, wenn die Sorge vor einer militärischen Eskalation in der Region ist groß. Die Gespräche werden deshalb in den nächsten Stunden intensiviert. Es wird auch Beauftragte der amerikanischen Regierung, des amerikanischen Präsidenten geben, die in der Region unterwegs sind. Und wir stimmen uns hier eng miteinander ab und wollen versuchen, auch unseren Beitrag dazu zu leisten. Wir wollen einen Beitrag dazu leisten, dass der Iran aufhört, die destabilisierende Macht in der Region zu sein. Und das ist der Wunsch, den ich auch in meinen Gesprächen wiedergefunden habe, auch mit den Gesprächspartnern gestern und auch ganz besonders heute.
New unemployment claims in the US have increased more than what was expected last week, largely due to snowstorms that disrupted work across many parts of the country. Experts say the labour market remains steady and pointed out that the increase is caused due to the typical year-end data fluctuations. Despite recent layoff announcements by major companies, recruitments and firing remain relatively low. Uncertainty around trade policies and the growing use of artificial intelligence has made businesses cautious about expanding their workforce. However, economists are hopeful that job growth will improve in the coming months, supported by steady consumer spending and broader economic stability. Spain and Portugal are facing flooding and widespread disruption after a new storm brought heavy rain and strong winds across the Iberian Peninsula. Emergency services have been put on high alert as flooded roads, power outages and transport disruptions were reported in several regions. Authorities say the storm has turned deadly, with casualties reported as rescue operations continue. Firefighters and civil protection teams are working to evacuate residents from low-lying areas and clear debris left by flash floods. Weather officials warn that unstable conditions could persist, raising concerns of further flooding and damage in the coming hours. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
The Interparliamentary Union to strengthen